We're live. Crew Chat is back. Today is Friday, March the 5th, 2021. We are
Wait, let
now
me turn down mine.
14 plus months into this abominable decade. But, hopefully we can talk a little bit about wine, a little bit about life, and kind of make everyone's life a little bit better. So this week, for the Wine of the Week, we're going back to America. We're going to go with a Pinot Noir. Everyone loves Pinot Noir. And the great thing about Pinot Noir is that it grows all over the world, right? So it's one of the 8 international or primary grape varieties. These are the 8 grapes that really grow everywhere in the world in different climates, in different places. And Pinot Noir is one of them. We'll talk about a bunch of them as we go through them this year. But the one we picked today is called Kate Arnold. And this comes from the great state of Oregon. I'm going to put my magical little stand here. So I know you're a fan of Pinot Noir, right?
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. Absolutely.
Now, do you have a particular place you like to get it from, like a geographical location that's your favorite?
I'm a big West Coast, Northwest, Willamette Valley. I think they have like the perfect environment for growing Pinot Noir grapes, and it's just crisp and delicious every time.
It is. So it's a cool climate. Now, Pinot Noir is one of those things that tastes a lot different depending on where you get it. So Oregon, just like up in France or down in New Zealand, they have this very cool climate up there. And that's going to make, as with any grape, that's going to make it lighter bodied. You can take a look at it. It's kind of a light bodied one. You can almost see through it on the edge. And,
especially if you compare that to what you had last week.
Right, which was definitely a little bit more robust, right? Well, that was a Rhone Valley wine, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah,
right.
So this is definitely a lot lighter bodied, and it's going to be more acidic too. Give it a little more of a kind of a tart bite to it. And that's what you're going to get from a cool climate wine or a grape. Now, if you get Pinot Noir from a warmer climate, like in California, so they make Pinot Noir south of Napa Valley in Carneros, and they make it in the Russian River Valley. A lot of people have had Pinot Noir from there. Totally different. It's very dark, it's very fruity, and kind of intensely flavored. And that's because it's warmer there, the grapes get more ripe, and so you get more fruit flavor and you get higher alcohol. I'm like you, I tend to prefer the cooler climate stuff. I don't know, I just think it's more delicious and it's better with food and stuff like that.
Right,
so,
and it's also better for just drinking on its own. Because it's
oh yeah,
when it's that crisp and light, it's just easy to kind of have a glass, for happy hour or something. Happy hours.
I agree. So let's talk about this one.
Okay.
Kate Arnold is the name of the winemaker. When I first picked this up, I figured it was the name of their daughter or something, because it's so common for these winemakers on the West Coast to name it after one of their kids or whatever. But it's actually the name of the winemaker herself. She and her husband do this stuff, and what they do is they actually buy grapes from small farmers around the area, and then they make the wine from those grapes. And this is actually a pretty common practice, especially in Europe, but also over in the U.S. So they're going to go and so a lot of people grow grapes. There's farmers that grow grapes, but they don't make their own wine, or they just make wine that they're locally going to have, just have in their own house for their own family.
Right.
So they go and they sell the grapes to either these co-ops or to other buyers that have the facility to actually make the wine. And so that's what these guys did. And because of that, it just says Willamette Valley on here. Now, Willamette Valley is the valley around the Willamette River, which flows up through central Oregon, connects to the Columbia River, and empties into the Pacific Ocean, kind of between Salem and Portland. And like you said, it's a great climate for growing this particular grape, which is a tough grape to grow. But the fact that it just says Willamette Valley and not a more detailed appellation kind of tips you off to the fact that they're taking grapes from all around the area and perhaps making wine out of them. So, which is a perfectly fine practice. Nothing wrong with that. But
so at that point, does it become more? The difference in the taste would be just from the way that the particular winemaker, their blend, or the way that they stored it, or what makes it special then? If they're not growing grapes on that particular vineyard, then what makes it special?
Well, so instead of having kind of a very specific soil type of a very specific vineyard, which they call a cru sometimes, right? It really showcases the whole area as a broader region, is what it is. And so, you know, they can blend the grapes to make it consistently taste consistent from year to year, or they can take grapes from a certain area in one year and a certain area in the next year and have it maybe taste different. So they really have the freedom to do what they want with that. But in America, consumers tend to they tend more to like consistency from year to year. Mm-hmm. And it's not until you get to the kind of the higher price wines that you start to see sort of it changing from year to year, and that's kind of a desirable thing for some people that are really into wines and exploring them. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the other thing I thought was cool about this, because I'd never had it before, I went to the website and checked it out, and they make a really big deal about how they want the wine to express the grapes, and they don't put any additives in it, and they don't use any technological cheats, if you will. And it kind of went on and on. They made a big deal about this, and it kind of got me thinking, you know, what they're really saying is that there's a lot of winemakers, especially in the U.S., that do this sort of thing. So they are going to...
It was like, not naming names, but we don't do that.
Right. And so it's actually pretty common with the large brands and the big conglomerates. So if you buy wine at the grocery store or something, well,
that's what we say. Like, you get what you pay for, right? If you're going to buy the $2 chuck, like, you're getting additives. It's just the way that it is.
Sure, right. You know, and there's a bunch of reasons for that, and we can talk about that some other time. But I just think it's interesting that, you know, you can go and read this on a producer's website and be like, what's actually going on out there? It turns out in the U.S. there's, you know, it's kind of like the Wild West, and there's very few regulations when it comes to winemaking. Actually, a lot fewer than any other food and beverage product. And a lot of that goes back to prohibition and kind of the rules that came out of that. But like the FDA doesn't require them to put a nutrition label or ingredients on the bottle. But they do allow, in America, they allow, I think, 75 to 80 different additives that can be added to a wine are permitted. And that's a lot. That's a lot of different kind of chemicals and things that you can use to kind of adjust and play with the taste. And sometimes that's to make it cheaper and more consistent from year to year. But sometimes it's also sort of that innovative, you know, let's experiment mentality that Americans tend to have. As opposed to in Europe, where it's really all about tradition and let the land express itself. And if it's no good this year, we just won't release any wine this year. You know, so very different mentalities, and you're going to see that from old world to wine world to old world to new world in wines. That theme comes up over and over again. So anyway, Oregon, very similar in kind of taste and terroir to France. Nice light-bodied wine, and I really like it. So I'd really recommend everybody go out and find a couple different Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs and give them a shot. And it is pronounced
definitely
Willamette, not Willamette or any of this. They sell T-shirts there that say it's Willamette, damn it, to remind you how to pronounce it correctly.
Right. Now, what's the price point on this wine?
This is probably about a $25 wine. So not too bad. You know, it's kind of
and honestly, in Willamette, most of your bottles, or the ones that I've found, that are going to be around $20. Like, it's not where you're going to find your cheapest wines, but they are at that price point, which are still fairly low. You're going to find some really, really good wines.
Yes, you are. I think I found one, so I'm pretty happy with this.
Good.
Did you try anything interesting this week?
I did not. I did, however, come up with our new wine story.
Can't wait. Let's hear it.
Okay. Are you done? Are you done talking about your Pinots? See,
I'm good. I'll wrap it up at the end.
We can talk about those forever. And now, like, I don't have one. I only have just like the rest of my white from last time. So, because I'm trying to be good, but I could talk about Pinot all day. I just absolutely love it. I think I probably have, like, every single one of these episodes, I'm always like, my favorite is Pinot.
We do come back to it time and time again, but
I know.
There's a reason for that.
It's there's a reason. It's a really good, drinkable, local, you know, great. So not local, like U.S. Great.
Yeah, that's right. Good stuff. So what do you have for us?
Okay, so this is not related to Pinot Noir, but it's related to a red, so that's kind of on the same, yeah. All right, so today's wine story, I want to take you back in history just a little bit. I want to take you all the way back to January 13th of 2021.
Okay.
When, at 8:36 p.m., the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida.
Yes.
And it had returned to Earth with a very precious cargo. Have you heard this?
Go on.
All right. Like 3 mice and 12 bottles of a French Bordeaux.
Excellent.
Now, this wine had spent over a year at the International Space Station as part of something called the Wine in Space experiment, or WISE.
Now, was this experiment officially sanctioned? Because this sounds like contraband to me.
It was, no. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, because it's actually, it took a long time to get approval for this. But it was an official experiment. It's part of a larger program on the agricultural sciences. So along with the 12 bottles of the the Bordeaux, they sent up like over 300 Cabernet and Merlot grapevines. And so they were studying not only the how you would grow crops or harvest or make wine in space, like if we went to Mars and we need a happy hour. Yeah. And so it's part of that larger program, but
yes.
Specific with the wine, they wanted to see how weightlessness affected the properties of the wine. So does it affect the carbonation or bubbles that might be in the wine, the sediment that's within the wine, how does that get affected? So this was the reason for sending up this case of French Bordeaux.
I love science.
Yes, and so, like you said, it took a lot of convincing to allow this to happen, because alcohol is prohibited on the International Space Station. And not because they're worried about like astronauts getting drunk or anything like that. I mean, they probably are, but more for safety purposes, because alcohol is volatile and they don't know how it actually, if some of it escaped, they don't know what would happen with the climate control systems. So they're just real careful about introducing any kind of external particles. And so this took a lot of planning and coordination to allow this case of Bordeaux to go up and stay on the International Space Station. And how those astronauts just like walked by that case every day and didn't just pop one open is beyond me. But apparently all 12 came back.
They didn't send a corkscrew. That was the trick.
Yeah. Yep. But there's a ways around that. We should do that on a show.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually a good show idea. There are some very innovative. That is great. I mean, this is a fantastic story. I actually did not know that.
But I can also tell you.
I thought you were going to tell me a SpaceX. If it's a SpaceX story, I thought it was going to end in an explosion.
But I can also tell you that, interestingly enough, this was not the first time that wine went out into outer space. No, in fact, wine was the first liquid poured on the moon.
And who did the pouring?
Well,
do we know?
Right before leaving the lunar lander, Buzz Aldrin took out just a tiny bit of wine and a chalice that he'd received from his church and self-administered communion.
Wow.
Before being the second man to walk on the earth.
You mean communion?
I mean, excuse me, on the moon. On the moon.
Right.
So he did communion, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that's excellent.
I think we just came up with the name for the episode.
Communion.
That's great. Now, was that the very first moon landing? Because I think wasn't Buzz Aldrin the second one to come out of the capsule.
He was the second man, because he was
Right.
doing communion. He was like, that's why he's like, you go ahead, I gotta like do whatever I gotta do.
You go ahead.
So yeah, so this was not really widely known. It was kind of kept on the down low, because at this very time was when there were all the battles about the separation of church and state were going on. And so NASA did not want to deal with like having religious services on the moon as part of the
They had their plate.
they just
full
didn't
enough.
want to deal with that. You know, it was going to be a lot of headache. So they like, okay, Buzz, if you want to do it, you can do it, but like keep it on the down low. So he did. And
Well,
so did John Glenn, and it came out years and years later.
That is fantastic. I remember JFK's words. By the end of this decade, communion on the moon.
Yeah.
Wine,
And so we did
will
it.
put
So
wine on the moon.
we did too. We did. And they tried to do it. They were like, okay, so we can send it up there. So in the 70s, because, you know, 70s were fun, scientists actually were looking at including wine in the rations for the astronauts. And it didn't pan out for a couple of reasons. It was scientifically an issue. And also, again, people got all mad about the possibility of like having a little post moonwalk, happy hour. And so it never actually happened.
Yeah, well, it's probably for the best.
Yes, that doesn't mean there wasn't alcohol that went into space. It's just, they didn't make an official part of it.
Indeed.
So. But back to our space case of wine that just came back. So the plan is now to do a chemical analysis, a full chemical analysis for a couple of years or a couple of months. They're going to like analyze it and all that kind of stuff. But this process was to start with a wine tasting in Bordeaux by some of France's top wine experts.
Fascinating.
And this was supposed to happen in February. I'm unable to find any information on whether or not this has happened, what was the outcome, but I'm assuming they're going to tell us at some point. They just are keeping it all quiet right now. There's like no information on whether or not it happened. They just said it was supposed to happen at the end of February. So it's possible that some of these French wine connoisseurs have tasted wine that was aged in space.
That is amazing. That's amazing.
Right?
I can't wait to hear the follow-up on this.
I know. As soon as I hear something, I'll let you know. But I was just absolutely fascinated by this. And like I said, this again is just wine in space. Mm-hmm. There's been plenty of other alcohols that have, slipped the surly bonds of Earth, and especially like, Russia. I'm looking at you. But
now, I do think it's interesting. And I know we're kind of a global scientific community now, but that SpaceX, conveying this wine up into space. Why did they pick Bordeaux? Do we know why they picked Bordeaux instead of kind of an assortment of different wines, or wine from maybe a South African wine would have made more sense? Just saying.
Yeah, no, we don't know, or sake, I don't know. We don't know why they picked this wine. We don't know the where it came from. We don't know the vineyard or the vintage that it came from, or we don't know anything. They haven't shared any of that information. They just said French Bordeaux, and that it was going to be first opened in Bordeaux for a tasting. I was not able to secure a bottle for this crew chat, unfortunately.
That's all right. Well,
they didn't have it at Walmart.
That's
so
on the staff, yeah. That's great, though. I mean, this speaks to the can-do spirit of scientists and winemakers alike. We can all be friends. We can all work together. God bless these people. They're just
right. There's wine in space. That's just brilliant.
This is a good segue, right? I was talking about the pioneering spirit of the American winemaker. Sometimes it doesn't end well, but sometimes it really does end well. And this is the same sort of thing. I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen. It could do nothing, and it could do something amazing.
Right.
And but the only way to find out is by doing it, by taking those chances, breaking the rules, and seeing what comes next. So
right, and I can tell you this much: I'm not going to Mars if there's not wine. So they better step on it.
Indeed.
Oh, and speaking of, just there's like a lot of information out there about wine in space and things like that. But there's one book that I can recommend by Chris Carberry called Alcohol in Space. But it's alcohol in space, past, present, future. So it kind of goes into the history, and it tells a lot of these stories about, you know, astronauts sneaking like whiskey in like books and stuff and taking that up into space capsules. Again, Russia, I'm looking at you. But it also talks about the future, and if we did do a Mars mission, like how would we be able to distill alcohol on Mars or something like that. So the foreword of this book was written by Andy Weir, who wrote the book The Martian.
Of course, yeah.
You saw that, and he says that
saw the movie.
one of the most popular questions he gets is when Mark Watney was growing all those potatoes, could he have turned that into vodka?
Yes, I know where you're going.
Yep. And he says he gets asked that question all the time. Like, could he have turned those potatoes into vodka?
Yeah.
And so that's in this book. If you're interested in that type of thing, it's actually it's really interesting, but also like scientifically informative. So
yeah, you've already got me thinking. Okay, the still needs gravity to. Never mind. I'm not going to go down that.
Right. Exactly. How is it going to happen? So they explore that whole thing too, and as well as going into all of this history about. What happened with alcohol and wine throughout the history of the space program.
Fantastic.
And that is this week's wine story.
I love it. I've heard of wine being aged underwater, and now I've heard of wine being aged
in space.
In orbit. And very exciting. What a time to be alive. That's great. I'll tell you what. Let's wrap it up. I'm going to bring this wine back out here. This is the Kate Arnold Willamette Valley Pinot Noir from Oregon. And
can you find that at just any wine store? Is it?
I don't know. You can find
easy to find.
It's not too hard to find. But again, as we always say on the show, don't worry about looking for a specific, label or producer that we talk about. Just go find something from the same general region, 2 or 3 things. Mm-hmm. And for Willamette Valley, stick in the $20 to $30 range, and you're going to be in good shape. So, like anything, to try to avoid stuff below that because it's not going to be of the best quality. So go $20 to $30, get a couple bottles of those and try them out, and you'll be very happy.
And then what does it pair with?
Well, Pinot Noir, you can drink it with just about anything. But this
yourself.
Is
a lot. It pairs very well with just me and like a marathon of my 600-pound life. So
it pairs.
You can try that.
Sure. And it pairs with pandemics apparently too. So anyway, go get yourself a bottle. Enjoy it. Look up to the stars. Think about our brothers and sisters orbiting the Earth, trying to find ways to make our wine better. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And plan for the future. Growing wine on the moon, growing wine on Mars. Why not?
Well, and also making the grapes hardier down here because they're worried about climate change and blights and all that kind of stuff. So this experience, not only if we go to Mars, but also, protecting our ability to drink wine right here on the good old planet Earth.
Exactly. Our home.
Right.
This is where I keep all my stuff, as the Tick famously said. Anyway, great story. Thanks a lot. Let's wrap it up. And wine of the week, Pinot Noir, Kate Arnold. Have a good one. And if you have any ideas or you have any suggestions or recommendations or ideas for wines we can showcase or things you want to talk about, cool wine stories you see in the news, just put them in the comments and we'll definitely do it. I mean, we have nothing else going on. So
yeah, it's a pandemic.
Exactly. All right, that's about it. See you next time. Enjoy.